The road to Somerset twisted through mist and heather, carrying Isabella Harland closer to the house she had not seen since childhood. Blackthorn Hall loomed above the valley like a ghost of stone and shadow, its dark windows staring down as though waiting for her return. The carriage halted before the gates, iron twisted with rust, and Isabella felt a shiver despite the summer air. Her late uncle, Lord Matthew Harland, had left her the estate with all its lands, though she hardly remembered him. Most spoke of him as a stern man who kept to himself after the fire that destroyed the West Wing 2 decades ago. Some said the blaze had been an accident, others whispered of betrayal. None dared speak of the young cousin who vanished the same night. Isabella stepped down, her boots crunching on gravel. The caretaker, an elderly man named Mr. Carter, bowed stiffly. "Welcome home, Miss Harland. Blackthorn has waited for you." The words chilled her. She glanced at the house. Its towers pierced the sky like jagged teeth, the windows reflecting only grey. Yet something about it stirred within her, a pull she could not name, both dread and belonging. Inside, the great hall smelled of smoke and age. Dust lingered in the air, stirred by her footsteps. Portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes following her every movement. She paused before one, a young woman with dark curls, her expression both tender and haunted. The plaque read Elizabeth Harland, 1821. Isabella leaned closer, certain the painted lips had softened into the faintest smile. That night, after Mr. Carter left her to settle in, Isabella wandered through the corridors by lamplight. The silence pressed heavily. Twice she thought she heard faint whispers, like voices carried by stone. A sudden draught extinguished her flame. In the darkness, she felt a breath against her ear, and a whisper that was not her own. Isabella froze, her heart pounding in the dark. The whisper had been clear, almost gentle, yet it carried an urgency that left her trembling. She struck a match with shaking hands and lit her lamp once more. The corridor appeared unchanged, stone walls, faded tapestries, doors that had not opened in years. Still, the echo of that voice clung to her ears. She hurried back to her chamber, bolted the door, and lay awake in her bed long after midnight. The fire in the grate flickered low, shadows creeping across the ceiling. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the painted face of Elizabeth Harland, lips curved in a knowing smile. Sleep came only in fragments, broken by the tolling of the old clock in the hall. At dawn, Isabella descended to the dining room. Mr. Carter was already waiting, setting a tray with tea and bread. His face looked drawn, as though he too had not slept. "Strange, is it not," he said quietly, "how the house remembers the living, and perhaps, the lost." She stared at him, startled. "You speak as though it breathes." He gave a faint, unreadable smile. "Some say it does." Later that morning, she explored the library. Dust covered the shelves, but the scent of old paper wrapped around her like incense. She pulled a book at random, only to discover another volume hidden behind it. It was a journal, its leather cracked, the initials EH burned into the cover. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first entry read, "If the fire comes again, it will not be an accident. I have seen the truth in their eyes, and I know they mean to silence me." The ink had bled with age, but the words were unmistakable. Isabella turned the page, and a loose scrap of parchment slipped free. It bore a hurried sketch of Blackthorn Hall with markings, an X beneath the west wing, where the fire had begun. At that moment, a sound broke the silence. Somewhere beyond the library door, footsteps moved slowly across the hall. Yet when Isabella flung the door wide, the corridor was empty. The discovery of the journal haunted Isabella all day. She kept it hidden beneath her shawl, afraid Mr. Carter might ask questions she was not yet ready to answer. As evening fell, her eyes were drawn again and again towards the ruined west wing, its blackened stone walls sealed behind heavy doors. Few dared approach that part of the house, yet the X on the sketch seemed to call her. When twilight deepened, she took a lamp and ventured into the corridor that led towards the forbidden wing. The air grew colder with each step, as if the very stones remembered the fire that had consumed them. Dust choked the air. Cobwebs stretched across the corners, trembling at her passing. At last she reached the locked doors. Rust stained the iron bolts, but the wood bore strange marks, as though someone had clawed at it long after the fire. Isabella touched the surface, and the chill seeped into her bones. She withdrew her hand sharply, her lamp flickering. A sudden knock behind her made her turn. Mr. Carter stood there, his lined face unreadable. "You should not be here, Miss Harland," he said gravely. "The West Wing holds nothing but ruin." Isabella hid the journal within her cloak. "And yet, I think it holds more than that." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then the old man lowered his gaze. "Your uncle warned me never to let anyone pass these doors. He said the walls hid more than ash." Isabella's heart quickened. What did he mean? Mr. Carter only shook his head. "Ask no further tonight." But when she returned to her chamber, she could not rest. She opened the journal again, turning to a later page. The entry was shorter, written in a hurried hand. "If I disappear, they will say I ran away. But the truth lies beneath the stones, where the fire began." Even as her eyes traced the words, she heard the whisper again, soft and close, though she was alone. This time it formed a name. Elizabeth. The following morning, rain swept across the valley, veiling Blackthorn Hall in a shroud of silver. Isabella, weary from another sleepless night, found herself unable to eat. The journal lay heavy in her pocket, its words burning in her mind. She needed someone she could trust, someone who might help her untangle the mystery without dismissing her fears. That afternoon, a carriage arrived. From it stepped Edward Sinclair, her childhood companion and now a historian of some renown. She had written to him weeks earlier, asking him to visit, never expecting he would come so soon. "Isabella," he greeted warmly, though his eyes lingered on the looming house. "It seems Blackthorn has grown darker since I last saw it." "You remember the fire," she said softly. "Who could forget? Half the county still speaks of it." They walked together through the echoing halls. Edward studied the portraits, pausing at the same one that had unsettled her, the young woman with dark curls. "Elizabeth Harland," he murmured. "She was never spoken of openly, was she?" Isabella hesitated, then drew out the journal. "I found this in the library. I believe it belonged to her." Edward's brow furrowed as he turned the fragile pages. "These are warnings, Isabella. And look, references to the West Wing, the fire, and something hidden beneath the stones." Their voices dropped to whispers, as though the house itself were listening. Isabella showed him the sketch with its marked X. Edward's hand tightened on the parchment. "If this is true, there may be more buried here than ashes. And perhaps someone, even now, wishes to keep it buried." Just then, a sound echoed through the hall above them. Slow, deliberate footsteps moved across the floorboards, though no one else was in the house. Edward glanced at Isabella, his expression sharpened. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Who else lives here with you?" Before she could answer, the footsteps ceased. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. The silence after the footsteps pressed upon them like a weight. Isabella felt the fine hairs on her arms rise, while Edward's gaze swept the corridor above with wary calculation. "At last," he said, "we must know what lies behind the West Wing door. Whatever haunts this house, the answer begins there." That evening, when Mr. Carter retired early, they carried a lantern to the sealed passage. The iron bolts resisted, stiff with rust, but Edward's strength forced them loose one by one. The door groaned open, releasing a draft of air so cold it carried the smell of charred timber and something faintly metallic, like blood long dried. The West Wing was a ruin. Blackened beams sagged overhead, and the floor was strewn with rubble. Each step echoed hollowly, as though the stones themselves remembered screams. Isabella clutched the journal tighter against her chest. Edward knelt by a fallen hearthstone, brushing away dust to reveal strange markings carved into its surface, symbols she did not recognize, a circle with lines intersecting like a compass. "Not fire damage," Edward whispered. "These were etched deliberately." They moved further in, following the sketched markings. At last they found the spot beneath a collapsed archway. Edward prized at the stones until one shifted loose, revealing a narrow cavity. Isabella reached inside and withdrew a bundle wrapped in scorched cloth. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. Within lay brittle papers, charred at the edges, and a locket of tarnished silver. She opened it to find the portrait of a young woman, Elizabeth, her painted eyes alive with sorrow. On the back was engraved a single word, truth. Before either could speak, a sudden crash resounded from the corridor they had entered. The lantern flickered violently, casting frantic shadows across the walls. Isabella's breath caught. Someone, or something, was in the west wing with them. The crash echoed until the silence returned, deeper than before. Isabella clutched the locket in her fist, her knuckles white. Edward raised the lantern high, its light unsteady, throwing jagged shapes across the broken walls. "Stay close," he murmured. They crept back towards the corridor, but no figure emerged. Only the sound of dripping water and the hiss of the wind through broken stone accompanied them. Yet both felt it, the undeniable presence of someone watching. Isabella's eyes fell once more to the brittle papers she had uncovered. Among them was a page less damaged by fire, scrawled in Elizabeth's hand. "The chamber lies beneath, and with it the secret that must not be spoken. If they find it, my silence will be eternal." Edward traced the lines with his finger. "A chamber beneath the west wing. If it survived the fire, it may still be there." He began to search the rubble with renewed purpose, knocking at stones, listening for hollow echoes. At last, beneath the remains of the staircase, he found a slab marked with the same strange compass-like symbol. Together they heaved at it until it shifted, revealing a narrow stair descending into darkness. The air that rose from below was damp and heavy, carrying a scent of earth long sealed away. Isabella's lamp flickered, though the flame was steady moments before. She hesitated at the top of the stair. What if it was meant never to be opened? Edward met her gaze, his voice low but firm. "Secrets buried breed only rot. We must see." They descended into the gloom. The stairway twisted sharply, carved from stone older than the house itself. At the bottom lay a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves of crumbling manuscripts and relics wrapped in linen. In the center stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a sealed box of blackened wood. Isabella stepped closer, heart hammering. She reached out a hand. And then, from behind them, the stair creaked. Someone had followed them down. The rain poured relentlessly over Blackthorn Hall, streaking the stone walls and darkening the courtyard. Isabella and Edward descended into the lowest cellar, guided only by a flickering lantern. The air grew colder, tinged with the acrid scent of soot. Beneath a rotting rug they uncovered a trapdoor of iron, sealed with an ancient lock. The key Isabella had found in the chapel fit perfectly. With a creak, the lock yielded, and they lowered themselves into a hidden chamber. The room was vast, lined with charred beams and blackened stone. In the center stood a long table, its surface etched with strange markings. Old documents lay scattered, preserved beneath layers of dust. Edward brushed one open, revealing a list of names, each belonging to a member of the Harland family, each marked with a symbol resembling a thorn. Isabella's eyes widened. It is not just a family tree. It is a ledger. And look, my name is written here. She pointed to the most recent entry. Beside her name was a mark unlike the others, darker, bolder. A sudden gust extinguished their lantern, plunging them into near blackness. From the far corner of the chamber came the sound of a chair scraping, though none had been there when they entered. Edward relit the lantern with trembling hands. The glow revealed what had been hidden in shadow, a tall figure draped in a cloak, watching them from the edge of the room. His face was obscured, but his voice was low and steady. "You should not have opened this place," he said. "The fire should have buried the truth forever." Isabella froze, her pulse racing. For the first time, she realized that the disappearance from years past, the whispers in the hall, and the ledger before her were all bound to a single secret. And the man before them was prepared to kill to keep it hidden. Henry forced the hidden door wide open, the rusted hinges groaning like a dying creature. The air inside the chamber was icy, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp earth and dust that had not been disturbed for centuries. His lantern revealed a vaulted crypt, lined with stone coffins, each engraved with the crest of the Ashbury family. And there, in the center, stood Eleanor. Her gown was torn, her face pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. Beside her loomed a man Henry recognized at once, Lord Ashbury, his own uncle, alive though the world believed him long dead. "You should not have come here," Lord Ashbury said, his voice echoing against the cold stone walls. "Eleanor found what I tried to keep buried. She uncovered the truth." Henry's grip on the lantern tightened. "What truth?" Eleanor's voice shook, yet carried strength. "The Ashbury fortune was built on betrayal. Generations ago, our ancestors stole land, forged alliances through bloodshed, and concealed their crimes beneath Ravenscroft. She pointed at Lord Ashbury, has kept the secret alive. And when I found the manuscripts, he tried to silence me." Lord Ashbury stepped forward, his face twisted with desperation. "The world cannot know. If this truth emerges, the Ashbury name will fall, and everything we have will be ashes." Henry moved between Eleanor and his uncle, heart racing. Better ashes than chains of lies. For a moment, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the drip of water from the ceiling. Then Lord Ashbury lunged, his hand reaching for Henry. In the struggle, the lantern slipped, crashing against the floor, spilling fire across the ancient crypt. The flames licked the coffins, devouring the dry wood and tapestries. Smoke filled the chamber. Eleanor grabbed Henry's arm. "We must leave now." But Lord Ashbury barred their path, his face illuminated by the fire. "If I burn, so will you. The Ashbury name will never be freed." Henry's pulse thundered as the flames closed in, and he realized that only one of them could escape the inferno alive. Henry descended the final spiral staircase, the air heavy with damp earth and the faint scent of old stone. His lantern cast trembling shadows along the rough walls as the passage opened into a cavernous chamber beneath Ravenscroft Manor. The floor was uneven, littered with fragments of wood and broken tiles, as if time itself had gnawed away at the place. At the center stood an ancient altar, carved from black stone, its surface etched with symbols that matched those in Eleanor's journal. On the altar lay a bundle of cloth. With trembling hands, Henry pulled it back to reveal a mask of iron, corroded with age, its features frozen in a grotesque grimace. Eleanor's final note had warned of the face that binds the Ashbury blood. Henry understood now that this mask was no ordinary relic, but the very object generations had hidden, the reason for so many locked doors and erased records. A faint sound echoed. Footsteps, deliberate and steady, grew louder from the corridor behind him. Henry spun, lantern shaking, as shadows stirred. From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in black, carrying a torch. It was his uncle, Lord Ashbury. "You should not have come here," Lord Ashbury said, his voice calm but edged with steel. His eyes glimmered in the torchlight, cold and unyielding. "That mask does not belong to you. It belongs to our family, and it must remain in the shadows, as it always has." Henry's throat tightened. Eleanor knew. She uncovered the truth, did she not? That is why she vanished. You silenced her to keep this buried. Lord Ashbury advanced, his gaze never leaving Henry. Eleanor was weak. She sought to expose what should remain hidden. But you, Henry, you still have a choice. Hand me the mask, and I will let you walk away. Refuse, and you shall share her fate. The chamber grew colder, as though the stones themselves were listening. Henry looked down at the mask, then back at his uncle. For the first time, he realized the battle was not simply about Eleanor's disappearance. It was about whether the Ashbury name would continue to be chained to its curse, or be freed. But before he could answer, a whisper stirred in the chamber, soft and eerie, as though the walls themselves carried Eleanor's voice. It called his name. And Henry knew he was not alone.